Hi. Do you remember When Harry Met Sally? It's this really well done modern kind of romance film that's been touted as this like really feel good story that owes a lot to its humor and its soundtrack and the way that it's shot. So today I want to take a look at two movies, When Harry Met Sally and Annie Hall. When Harry Met Sally, directed by Rob Reiner, 1989, and Woody Allen's Annie Hall from 1977. And while these two movies might share the same DNA, being two romance comedies in New York City, they take their answers to this question of can two different people come together and be in a good relationship very differently. I guess I'll just start real quick with Annie Hall. So Annie Hall is an extremely subjective film. Its major question is discussing this idea of this Groucho Marx quote of why would I want to be a club that would have me as a member, relating to dating and relationships and finding the one. And it relates to this kind of self-hatred that I think is very sympathetic. We can empathize with that kind of feeling. That if you hate yourself, how can you love someone who loves you? And that's kind of the major question of Woody Allen's film. It's very unique film, and it's unfortunate that it's made by Woody Allen because it's a very good movie, despite the fact that Allen is like the worst human alive. I'll put some resources in the description. I don't know if for people who are out of the loop or whatever, but it's a great movie. If you can get around this separating the art from the artist. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The main question of that movie is, how can I love someone who loves me? It's this insanely subjective from Woody Allen's perspective as this kind of fictitious Alvy Singer, his character's name, and how he goes about getting to Annie Hall and how he romances her and how he can be her best bud, or how they can play tennis together and drink wine on the rooftops, how they can have this connection, but still there's this air of insincerity about it, how Alvy Singer is this comic who is above it all. He's above New York City. He's above Los Angeles, especially. And later in the later half of the film, Annie Hall is like breaking up with him and whatever, moves to Los Angeles to be with Paul Simon. Side note, a lot of interesting casting in this movie. Like, you'll be pointing at the screen going, "Oh, that's it. That's Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel." Yeah, there's a Jeff Goldblum appearance. It's probably my favorite line in the entire movie. Yeah, it's just a great movie. There's a lot of self-referential, speaking directly to the camera moments, which is kind of this subjective nature. It's Woody Allen's movie. It's not a movie about these characters. It makes itself known that it is a movie about being a filmmaker. It's not When Harry Met Sally, it's Annie Hall. And even in their titles, you can kind of get to the core message and direction of the movies, where it's Alvy Singer is getting to Annie Hall. Annie Hall is the prize. Annie Hall is the objective. Annie Hall is the thing he can't live without. And then we get to When Harry Met Sally, and it's this becoming friends and then forming a relationship without the barriers of I need to appear cool to this person, I need to romance them or whatever. And I think that that's maybe not the correct way, but that's the ideal way of looking at a relationship, where it's not a chase, it's a collaboration. It's when Harry also met Sally and when Sally met Harry. When Harry Met Sally's question is, can two friends who sleep together love each other in the morning? And it's just the comedy is different. It's a decades apart. You don't get this 70s pessimism and negativity that kind of comes with the age of the late 70s. You get this just kind of feel good energy. And while When Harry Met Sally is more digestible, it doesn't diminish from its themes or the way it's shot or its narrative. And it's just it's a movie that makes you feel good. And that's cool. Yeah, let's get into this kind of similarities I noticed while watching. Can an LA girl and a New York boy ever be together? And is that a sustainable relationship. There's this pessimist versus the idealist kind of combating each other the entire runtime of the film, where it's Woody Allen can't go to a bookstore with Annie Hall without reminding her of death. And Annie Hall Annie can't just sit around and be with somebody who says stuff like that all the time. And it's almost like an incompatibility from the start, that they're both this nervous energy, but there's the naive like energy that Annie has, that because of it's so subjective, you almost wonder if it's heavily like sexist. It's heavily like Woody Allen's perspective. And because it's like this semi-autobiographical kind of film, it's kind of telling on himself a little bit about what kind of a person Woody Allen is. How he can be very funny, but also kind of insufferable to be around. When Harry Met Sally is taking two unlikely people who let their guards down and become friends just by getting to know each other without the barriers of boyfriend, girlfriend, man seeking man, woman seeking woman. And it's long distance relationships, and they're finding out that they're in love with each other just by being close with one another, and the sex doesn't ruin the relationship. It strengthens it. When Harry Met Sally is more concerned with taking both sides of the relationship. You're not looking at the subjective 70s man who thinks he's the hot shit and is trying to get with the girl by the end. When Harry Met Sally is not interested in this hunt, it's this collaboration, which is how a relationship should be. It's everyone putting their best parts together and then ending up with something that's better than the sum of those parts. Annie Hall is obsessed with the pessimism of the 1970s and the general unease of the time. Nothing is neatly wrapped up by the end of the film. When Harry Met Sally is perfectly comfortable with its cushiness and its humor, that it can neatly wrap up in the end. And Harry and Sally can end up together and have this moment where they're just like the other interviews of the old people who are talking about how they met each other. The feel-good energy of When Harry Met Sally is what allows it to be comfortable enough presenting the conventional heterosexual love story, because it considers all aspects of it. It considers the female perspective, which is unheard of for Annie Hall. You just get Alvy Singer. You just get Woody Allen. In Rob Reiner's answer, you get two people who are equally treated and equally considered in the love affair. We can get into kind of the similarities now, just on a scene-by-scene basis. They use the same restaurant from the I'll have what she's having scene as they do when Sally does the order a sandwich for an hour. It takes her an hour to order a sandwich, which is kind of when Harry Met Sally picks these pieces off of the plot of it and creates it into this whole new thing, where you're taking this idea of women be like, takes an hour to order a sandwich, and men will be like, I'll have the number 3. While Alvy Singer is kind of rolling his eyes and being very judgmental about how the right way or the wrong way to order a sandwich, Harry, when Sally orders a sandwich and pie on ice cream on the side or whatever, Harry is enamored with it. He admires that about Sally, how she knows what she wants because she knows what she likes, and Harry loves that about her. The thing about both of these movies is it's not looking at the negatives of a partner, it's looking at the quirks and the differences, not as a way to other the other person or to make yourself feel better about yourself, but to appreciate something that is different from yourself, and to not cast that aside as something foolish or dumb or, wow, you're fucking crazy for taking an hour to order a sandwich. Both feature this kind of shopping together, whether it's Harry and Sally in the department store singing karaoke and talking about Pepper Cash, or it's Alvy and Annie going through a bookstore and he pulls out a book about death that only he could like. Both feature these kind of intimate moments of like domestic bliss where it's couples, not necessarily Harry and Sally, but arguing about integrating into each other's lives, into each other's homes, choosing to keep the coffee table, or not wanting to get married, or not wanting to move in together at all, to keep Annie's apartment, even though Annie is going to be moving in with Alvy. The rolling out of the carpet, one of the more iconic shots of the movie. And it's important to look at this moment of domestic bliss as something challenging in both movies, but it's something that When Harry Met Sally's direction is embracing these qualities and not being judgmental about them. So while Harry is enamored with Sally for taking an hour to order a sandwich, Alvy rolls his eyes at Annie, claiming to himself that his way is the better way, and while that might be the better way for him, it might not be the better way for Annie. There's this immense focus on sex and heterosexual relationships and gender roles. There's this male demasculization, not a word, probably not a word, but where Alvy is fearful of these lobsters when it's kind of irrational and it's kind of hilarious. And Harry he's fashionable and he has this taste in fashion, and he sings to Sally on the phone in this kind of pathetic, like, please take me back kind of way. Worth noting the music. There's one notable track on both movies that is It Had to Be You. It Had to Be You is kind of the theme song to When Harry Met Sally. And Annie Hall, it's Annie singing in this nightclub. That's just kind of a moment that happens within their relationship, as she thinks that her singing is bad and he thinks that it's excellent and it's great and she did a great job. It's not that Annie Hall's perspective is wrong, it's that it's subjective and that it's from one perspective and that it's incredibly anxious. It's this nervous romance that makes Annie Hall so appealing and so entertaining to watch. Is this maybe this is appealing to my anxiety more than anything else, but it's just a wonderful depiction of second guessing yourself and not believing your own instincts and believing the worst. It's just hilarious. It's great. And there's this New York in both movies. There's this New York walking conversationally where it's two people walking down the street like shoulder to shoulder and just talking. In Alan's film, it's this kind of long shot. They're far in the distance, and in Rob Reiner's, Harry and Sally are kind of walking together and walking in unison, and the camera's not super far away, but you get these kind of medium long shots where they're walking across a hill. It's the scene where they're talking about Sally's sex dream. The New York walk and talk is just kind of amazing. It's kind of cliched at this point to talk about New York as the character in all of these movies, but it's kind of undeniable that the skyline and the character of the city and the public transportation and just the general liveliness of the city is present in both films. And there's this common split screening between both movies to show different perspectives, and it's different in this subjective Woody Allen film where it's these two families having dinner, talking to each other, kind of breaking the fourth wall and talking about the same thing at their family dinners, but communicating with each other somehow. In When Harry Met Sally, it's this division straight down the middle of here's Harry watching Casablanca and here's Sally watching Casablanca. But it's using this split screening technique completely differently. Like in Woody Allen's, it's all the way to the left and you only get a sliver of of Annie's family at the dinner table, and you get this huge shot of this kind of family New York dialogue of this family life compared to this kind of more religious repression. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to compare and contrast these New York comedies. We can appreciate the differences between them, the things that a film a decade apart from another one can iterate on the same kind of themes, and how just because you're kind of ripping off certain aspects of a film doesn't make it any less valid or any less impactful. Just because you're influenced by something else doesn't make it any worse. In some ways, When Harry Met Sally is better than Woody Allen's Annie Hall. And in those subtle differences, it's why I prefer When Harry Met Sally. But it's also that those sharper edges in Annie Hall are what I love about that film. The pointiness of the character of Alvy Singer, and how he's kind of self-sabotaging himself in the relationship. When Harry Met Sally is not Annie Hall with the anxiety ripped out, because the anxiety is there. I think you should watch both movies if you haven't already. I would start with Annie Hall or start with When Harry Met Sally, doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's kind of all I have written. I hope this was good. Okay, bye.